Well, the newest changes in the OTA patch finally make everybody say, hell yeah, to hell yeah. Find out what's going on as I hereby invite everyone to join me on my adventures through Marvel Snap. Hey everybody, it's Annabelle. So we got two patches this week. Woo! One of which was very tiny, one of which was very huge, and we're going to go over both because one is so tiny it's not even worth talking about. So, really quick, the change that happened on Tuesday. Cards like Agatha Hartley and all the cards that used to say at the start of the game now have the text that say game start on them. So there's that change. The change has happened to the collection, where if you now roll the mysterious spot in your spotlight caches, you'll get the 2,000 tokens instead of the 1,000 tokens. And they've changed the number of Series 3s that you'll get if you're a newer player. They have changed it from going from being a 2 out of every 9 to a 4 out of every 9. All this was discussed earlier and has already been talked about, but just in case you didn't know, all these changes are now currently live if you've updated your game client. Now to talk about the patches that we just got today. These patches are out. These patches are live. Make sure you are updated to get these patches. First patch thing that we want to talk about is one of the weirdest, curiouses, not sure buff, nerf, where this technically falls, change ever. So the change that I think a lot of people are going to be talking about is Hela. Hela got changed from a 6-7 to a 6-9. She has lost the -3 on Resurrect that she used to have. But now, when she resurrects, she'll only resurrect one card from each card cost that got discarded. So she can discard a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, but she can't get back 2 3s or 2 4s or 2 5s. So if you discard your hand and it's all 5s and then you play Hela, you'll only get one card back. I'm not sure if this is a nerf, I'm not sure if this is a buff. Honestly, it seems like a buff because there are a few cards that Hela used to run or would run. If you're talking about playing just the normal cards that are dangerous with Hela, you're talking about Infinite, which is the 6 drop. And you're talking about most likely the Death, which is technically a 7 drop, unless they consider it a 6 drop, 4 drop if it goes down. Now, if they change that to be a factor, that might be more interesting. But the fact that the Death is a 7 drop means that if you're just running the Death and the Infinite, which are the two most common things that Hela will run. Oops. Whoop. There's the Infinite, and there's the Death, which is an 8, not a 7, sorry. So if you just discard the Infinite and the Death, you're basically getting them both back. And you might get a little bit curious or a little bit dangerous because of the fact that, like, if you're running 2 6s, it only pull back 1, so you can't go super heavy anymore. And just load your stuff up with like a ton of 6s and hope for the best. But it's kind of dangerous, especially if you start running some 0s just to balance it out. So I would watch out for it. I would be curious about it. I almost will go out on a limb and say this isn't the last change to Hela. Again, Alright, next one that we're going to talk about with the card changes is the next buff that we got. Which almost I had to read 6 times to realize that it was a buff and not a nerf. And that's Mr. Fantastic. Mr. Fantastic went from a 3-2 to a 3-1, which sounds like the biggest nerf in the world, especially for a card like Mr. Fantastic. But now, the ongoing effect, the left and the right, if you play it in the middle, it's been changed to +3 instead of +2. I honestly am glad about this. I think you could have kept it as a 2 and still been fine with this. I want them to change Mr. Fantastic so it can just do this regardless. It seems weird that this is one of the few middle-only cards that exist. Not that you have to play it in the middle, but it works best in the middle. But if you change Mr. Fantastic so it just had this ability, it might be better if you said other vocations have +2 power instead of adjacent the other vocations, and then have it stretched depending on where you play it. It makes it a way better and way useful, more useful card, I should say. Next up on the buff list is we got a small buff to Onslaught. Onslaught went from 7 to 8. Whoop-de-doo. Nobody cares. Sure, somebody cares, not me. Sentry went from a 4-8 to a 4-9, and up in retrospect, the Void went from a 4-8 to a 4-9. Kind of big for the Void Sentry combo. Trying to balance it between being broken with a lot of the push with the Annihilus that's out there, and keeping it out of the Searcher deck to a certain degree, because this is almost just trying to balance between keeping it out of Searcher and making it so it still can be played in Annihilus. And that's kind of a weird thing with the change of Searcher and how it's gone out, of how many cards now have to be curious about being that 10, where it used to just be a common thing for a card to be 10, and now it's just, like, you're more curious about it being, not playing in the Searcher deck, the Scar deck, the 10s deck, depending on how you want to view it, and it just being a target for Shang-Chi. Now it's not so much that Shang-Chi kills it as you don't want it to be in the 10s deck. Next card that we have up on the buff list is we got the Ka-Zar. Ka-Zar went from a 4-4 to a 4-5. Still does the same exact thing. I honestly, and I'm going to be nice to this deck, this whatever. I honestly believe at this particular point that you could give this +2 power instead of +1 power and it still wouldn't break the game. Ones are so fragile to a certain degree, because unless you're playing one card in your deck, the Kyra, they can just die to Killmonger, that you should have Ka-Zar be the better option than Patriot, where Patriot is the better option because there's less no effect cards, I should say. Next up, we've got a really interesting one, which is, I'm not sure if the buff is a nerf, is where it falls in. Technically, it's considered a buff because it's moving down 1 in power and moving 1 down in cost. So technically, it really kind of stayed where it was, but makes this more of a tech option that you can play, which is Spider-Man. So Spider-Man went from a 3-5 to a 2-4, so 1 down in cost, 1 down in power. Still does the same exact thing. Again, it's more interesting now because you might just throw it into a deck for no other reason than as a tech card. This is becoming the tech slot of his. And that's not a bad card for 2 for 4 power. That's almost premium stats for 2. Let me look at 2 real quick, hang on. 2 premium stats would be a 5, basically. But that's basically about a cloak or a common wing, which is just decently premium stats. Alright, those are the boss. Let's start talking about the nerfs. Let's talk about the 2 cards I don't have, and then we'll go over the 2 cards, the rest of the cards that I do have. So the cards that I currently don't have, and I'm not going to buy just to do a video on them, is, first of all, Hydration Robert, or also known as Hydra Bob, has went from a 1-5 to a 1-4. I think everybody and their mother has talked about how Hydration Bob as a 1-5 was a just play it card regardless of what else it did. And then a 1-4 puts it in all the rest of the categories of 1-drops that can get up to 4, decently speaking. And what a lot of people used to call a nerf that it will move, now can be almost considered a buff that it can move. You don't get to control the move, but having a move card can be good enough. The other one that we have to talk about that I don't have in my deck is the double nerf that we got, which is to the Scream. Scream went from a 2-3 to a 2-2. And now it will no longer work if you play the Luke Cage. So if you have your Scream out and your opponent plays the Luke Cage and they move stuff, your Scream will no longer gain power. Kind of annoying. I almost wish Second Dinner would have went the other route on this. This was a noticed bug when Rocket and Groot came out. So for all the time that Scream existed, until Rocket and Groot came out, this wasn't a bug. But then as soon as Rocket and Groot came out and they had a different interaction with this, Second Dinner went, oh yeah, the bug isn't with Rocket and Groot, the bug is with Scream. So we're going to talk about Luke Cage for a bit, because Luke Cage technically got a nerf also. Luke Cage went from a 3-3 to a 3-2, lost 1 point of power. What the tap dancing do? Luke Cage is becoming this card, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, where they almost gotta split this card into 2 different cards. It's becoming too much of an answer for too many different things. The fact that it protects your stuff, the fact that it punishes your opponent's stuff, that should almost be changed into 2 different things. The fact that it stops stuff like Scream, I don't know why it stops Scream. I mean, it kind of makes sense and it kind of doesn't. I mean, what should really happen, in my opinion, is the Scream should still happen. And then if you get rid of the Luke Cage, you go back to what would have happened if you never played the Luke Cage. I don't know how playing down the Luke Cage and playing 2-3 turns and not losing that power, you technically still lost the power. And you know, it's such a weird interaction where you kind of scratch your head there and go, why? And have one card that basically just sits there and goes, that makes no sense. Because if you play Cyclops and you have Luke Cage out. The Cyclops still does its little hit, and just nothing happens. And then at the end of the game, you kill the Luke Cage somehow, silence the Luke Cage somehow. All the negative effects that happen on the card that Cyclops hit, the High Evolutionary Cyclops, I should say, are still there. So, why is it that for just 2 cards in the game, or 1 keyword in the game, however you want to view it, Luke Cage completely changes how everything works? It's just not consistent in the game, and it's making me not like Luke Cage, because Luke Cage should be basically something that you use as a tech card, not something that you use as a card that now you basically have to throw in almost every deck because it's too good at many different things. Like, I can understand the fact that you don't lose the -2. That's fine. But the Scream should still get the +2, because if you kill the Luke Cage, everything should be like the Luke Cage never was played. That's just how I view it. It's just weird, because there's other interactions like High Evolutionary Cyclops. With how this is written right now, every other card that Luke Cage if you silence Luke Cage, it would affect you negatively. Now, technically, it wouldn't work with how Luke Cage works. Like, again, the theoretically, in that case, then if you have Luke Cage out and you play Cassandra Nova shouldn't gain any power. It's just too inconsistent. I really don't like that change. Next up, we're going to talk about U.S. Agent. U.S. Agent got changed from a 2-3 to a 2-3, which sounds exactly the same, except now it's ongoing. Instead of taking away -4, it takes away -3. I'm kind of happy about this change. I want one other change to happen. And this is more to the other half of this combo. Where are you, buddy? Because I want the Man-Thing to go up to -3 power. Man-Thing just has not seen the light of day. It's just not working. It's so weird that the Man-Thing takes away -2, but the U.S. Agent takes away -4. So if you look at the U.S. Agent, let's say this is a 2-3, so let's double this up to a 4-6. Let's make this a 4-6, and let's make this a -3, and then they're running on the same power levels. I like the fact that it's changed. It's about time that that's changed. But I almost want Man-Thing to now get that +1 buff that it's missing. So that's everything that we have in the game right now. I want to thank you all so much for watching. And as always, remember, play for fun.